the entries who were on time, and the meeting went off well. The only issue that was discussed was the timeline and the rationale for the Semoy Hackett debacle. Present at the meeting was the President, Mr. Ephraim Seret, Vice President, Mr. Commission, a member, Secretary Alan Babulal, and Legal Advisor Tyrone Marcus for the entries. And on the ministry side and sport company, the Minister, the Permanent Secretary, the Advisor to the Minister, the CEO of the sport company, the head of the SPDU Department, Sport Development Unit at the sport company, and the Communications Department of the sport company. Some key issues were discussed and clarity was sought on the decision-making process. Overall, I can tell you that I am not impressed in the least. On many issues, the information provided was either inappropriate, at times inaccurate, and in other times presented situations of conflict of interest and improper decision-making thought processes and so on. I will go into more detail tomorrow because the meeting was extensive and the Secretary at the Ministry is doing the verbatim minutes, and we'll give you a summary of those minutes so that it will not be Anil just talking to you. I'll provide you with the answers to the questions. Some of those questions that were asked today, and I'll provide you with the questions and the answers tomorrow as soon as they've been typed up. Did the entries receive official independent legal advice on this issue? Because one would think that such an issue, anti-doping, where an athlete has been found cheating, to lift a ban and take a risk of the reputation of Trinidad and Tobago, that an august responsible organization would seek a variety of legal opinions before moving forward. So that question was asked. And then I also asked what was the existing case law and the success of athletes dealing with the Court of Arbitration for Sport. And also asked whether the athlete Semoy Hackett, because she had been banned and punished by the NCAA, for example, whether she was suing the NCAA, her university, the IAAF, WADA, USADA, and so on. What were key instructions, key points were made, because the government of Trinidad and Tobago has a zero tolerance on doping, on cheating. We do not tolerate it whatsoever, and zero means zero. Recently, the government, the opposition, the PNM opposition, and independent senators all agreed and passed the anti-doping in sport bill. You don't really get the opposition and the government agreeing on anything. So this zero tolerance issue on cheating is a very serious position held by all. And it was clear that the decision of the disciplinary panel and the entries to lift the ban did not comply with that zero tolerance position, even though the entries stated that they have a zero tolerance but could not answer why they then lifted the ban. The problem is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago does not fund people who test positive. So Semoy Hackett was not and is not in receipt of government funding and the elite program. She was removed when she tested positive, and the information came out. She had tested positive A and B sample in 2011 and 2012 after the NCAA. So after 2012, when it became public, no funding. But in this situation, because of the NAAA's position of lifting the ban and selecting Semoy Hackett to go, it turns out that the government of Trinidad and Tobago actually funded Semoy Hackett. So this is a very serious issue. While the NAAA is autonomous, this minister and this ministry, the permanent secretary, have responsibility to the people of Trinidad and Tobago on where the taxpayers' dollars go. And taxpayers' dollars are not to go to cheaters. So the NAAA will have to respond on that, because the IAAF refunds for the World Championship those athletes who are in good standing and good stead and compete. They refund. The government pays in advance, so the government, the taxpayers pay, but we will not get any refund whatsoever for Semoy Hackett, which means that the government and the taxpayers have paid for her to go and embarrass the country. It's a very serious issue. Furthermore, there was a letter that I am still to ask to receive. Now this meeting, as you know, was well planned. It was supposed to come off some time back, and it eventually came off. But the N3As did not come today with a letter from the IAAF, where the chairman of the disciplinary panel, Mr. Commission, told me on 2 or 3 occasions in the meeting that the IAAF letter said that Semoy Hackett should run. Now later on, having been grilled by the permanent secretary, and we asked for that letter, but we do not have it, and I want him to bring it for me so that we can share it with the media and the public. It is very important. But being grilled at the end of the meeting on the 3rd occasion, Mr. Commission, the chairman of the disciplinary panel that lifted the ban on Semoy Hackett, admitted that the last sentence of the letter read words to the effect that it is in the best interest of the athlete not to participate. Not to participate. So the initial part may have dealt with certain situations. If an N3A or disciplinary panel lifts the ban, they will say, well, okay, if you lift the ban right now legally, the athlete is legally able to run based on our systems and so on. But we are going to appeal your decision so they can legitimately run. However, with best practice and the systems that we go through, it is advised that she not be selected and not be allowed to run in the national championships. That was the letter from the IAAF. So now the N3As has to explain why did they go against that advice. At the conclusion of the meeting, we are hearing that the N3As have said that in their recommendation to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, they are going to now recommend that Semoy Hackett be banned. Now, if anybody in this country or in this room could explain to me how the group that lifted the ban when the ban existed could now go and say, well, the ban, uphold the ban, I am at a loss. I leave it up to the media now and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago to formulate their opinion. I will call you all tomorrow. Please bear with me because I want to provide you with, tomorrow is not good?
I'm going back to Tobago today.
But we will fax you, you will leave your information with Ms. Nunez and we'll fax you the information because they're typing up. It was an hour and 20 minutes, so you know it's going to be a lot of minutes. We're going to give you the key issues to the question for you verbatim as they were asked and answered. All I can say is it is a sad day for Trinidad and Tobago, and we hope that we move on from this and we learn to communicate better and to understand that zero tolerance means zero tolerance. If you have zero tolerance on domestic abuse, it's not all right to say that you just slap your wife. It is not all right to say if you have zero tolerance on drinking and driving, that you were just one bear over the limit. It is not all right to say if you have zero tolerance on corruption, that you just thieved $7,000. It is not all right to say that there's zero tolerance on doping and someone who tests positive A and B sample in 2011 and A and B sample in 2012 is allowed to compete. That is not zero tolerance and will not be accepted. So I can say that in the meeting I was not happy with any of the answers. In fact, it is rather sad that something like this, embarrassment of Trinidad and Tobago, could have been avoided had the N3As used better judgment, had they communicated with the Permanent Secretary, the Ministry of Sport, and advisors of situations that existed and allowed us to give an input. And thirdly, most importantly, had they sought independent legal advice. On an issue of this nature, they did not even get one senior counsel opinion. There was no written legal advice for the N3As to hand to the Permanent Secretary or to the Minister to say, look, we got senior counsel, we went, we showed, this was the opinion that we followed. I was thinking that that was something that would have said, all right, but if senior counsel who brighter than me and who have still, if they find that is the way to go, well, I disagree, but I have to accept. They did not seek any legal advice from independent sources. On any issue of a national nature, you will know the minimum acceptable number of opinions is 3. Because you will always find lawyers who can argue one way or the other, but you need to get the best advice. On this issue, they took none. And what was most worrying, finally, is that the General Council of the Amateur Athletics Association was never notified at any time about the decision to lift the ban, so that was not ratified by the General Council of the NAAA. And secondly, on the selection of the team that went to Moscow, the team was never ratified by the General Council. And I thought the answer given by Mr. Commission today was one that is totally unacceptable. That the General Council cannot be notified on run-of-the-mill day-to-day matters. I put it to you and I put it to the population that the selection of a national team to represent Trinidad and Tobago at a biannual World Championship is not a run-of-the-mill, everyday activity of the entries. It is a special situation which requires full discussion, discourse, and ratification by the General Council. Furthermore, the first time in history that an athlete who had tested positive was going out to represent Trinidad and Tobago, that has never happened ever, and therefore cannot be described as a day-to-day activity of the entries, and therefore it should have sought ratification of that decision from the General Council. They admitted today that they did not do that. It is a sad day for track and field with this administration, and I will fill you in with more details tomorrow. Thank you very much, and sorry to keep you all waiting.